get started. Hope everybody has their coffee, ready to go. All right. I'd like to call to order the 105th meeting of the Barataria-Terrebonne National Entry Program Management Conference. Thank you all for being here on this glorious chilly day. We're here in the student ballroom, and I have no remarks for you, but we have done roll call by the sign-up sheet side, so it's very important for us to document who's here at this meeting. So if you have not signed into the sign-up sheet, the front back behind me, please make sure you do that before you leave today, so we have an accurate record of who all is here. The minutes have been sent out and they're available up front. Anybody would like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
All right, that was Tim Allen, right?
Yep.
Yep, and second, Dr. Brian Roberts. All in favor? All right, good. Thank you all for all of that. I think right now we're going to turn our attention. We've got a setup so for our speakers today. You can go up to the podium and speak and hear from our leader, Steve Bradley, with his directing report.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. We're going to actually have a pretty packed agenda today. We had an add-on that we'll get to, so I'm going to go through pretty quickly here and just try to give you some of the high points of there's just an incredible amount of work that is taking place day in, day out through water quality monitoring and invasive species group, the habitat through the marine debris, a lot of ongoing things, and doing more and more with our with FlowCon. So let me go ahead and see. There we go. Okay, so basically we have things that try to find a way of getting my arms around everything that's going on, and I think that we're really hitting the mark in these three areas in collaboration or partnership and progress that's being made. One of the big areas of concern of EPA and thus of BTNEP and of this management conference has been increased work and opportunity to be having marine debris in the estuary. And to that end, have some ongoing projects like the Elmer Island, Louisiana Fish and Wildlife is re-up with us. And this very exciting project that was done with the French Quarter Fest of Rougarou, which was a diversion project. Never been done before, and I think that it was funded by the Gulf of Mexico program of EPA, and I think that's something we're going to pursue in the future. Emily Bro, Emily, are you here, Emily? There she is in the back there. So Emily Bro from our staff was promoted. She's our new marine debris coordinator and volunteer coordinator, and Emily's been doing a fantastic job, and this got us in a whole lot more opportunities. In our collaboration with, we don't say enough, we really hardly ever mention our our closest and oldest and most reliable collaborator is and has always been Nicholls State University. We have a number of ongoing projects. We're going to have a place in the new Coastal Center. You can see Natalie Waters there with some special projects that are going on with Nicholls Pollinator Gardens and bird studies, habitat workshop, and it's just a rich source of cooperation between us and the university, and we provide many opportunities for Nicholls students, many of whom work at our native plant facility. Speaking of the farm, we have our Ashley Lambiot here, who runs the nursery and has made this just a very welcoming destination for lots of groups that want to come and entertain opportunities for different groups. Here we see the FFA. Bayou STEM is a collaboration that continues to grow with BTNEP in a lot of areas. Our biggest contractor, of course, and we've got Ryan seated here, the CPRA is our biggest contractor, but there are a bunch of other groups that are coming to BTNEP, and we are ever expanding, which we'll go over in just a little bit. You all know Michael Massamy, who is our invasive species coordinator. He's been doing a remarkable job. Under his leadership, we put together a tableau summit, which I'm not going to go, he's going to present on that later in the program. But it was a very interesting partnership that we had with LSU and USDA on a very important topic that he'll go over. In our water quality realm, we have Stephen Nunez working on the citizen science program. And then one from our communications group, which is just starting to really pay dividends. And this is Emily Noblock. Bob Levon is the point person for this. I mentioned before is The Precipice. It's a film that we sponsored that was produced by Louisiana Public Broadcasting that tells the story of tribe looking for recognition. And we're just at the point where this is, even though the work was done almost a year ago, we're at the point now where the movie is being shown. It is up for 2 Emmys. It is being featured this weekend at the New Orleans Film Festival. And the plan is to perhaps in the spring that we get this up and take it to Congress so that we can help get the word out on all the issues that are facing the tribe. I mentioned earlier LumCon. That's who we're affiliated with under the leadership of Dr. Brian Roberts, who's made close collaboration with LumCon possible and attractive for both of us. And we are doing more and more with LumCon. And so they're also going to be working on the nerve, the deer, the nerve deer. But we're going to have many more opportunities to have a 3-basin approach to a lot of the issues that we work on. We go to them for the safety meetings, and also BlueWorks, which I think you all know about. It's a new building in Homeland. It's a headquarters for LumCon. Not the headquarters, it's a satellite office for LumCon, but we're going to have a presence there, and that'll be starting in the next month. One of our greatest partners, of course, is our foundation. Dr. Gary LaFleur is here, I believe. There he is, until we get a report from there. But we just had, since the last meeting, we had a White Boot Gala. We just have incredible partnership with SPARS. They opened up the house for us literally, and we always have a capacity time. We filled every seat, and in this upcoming year, they are actually having an addition, so we'll be able to increase our participation by about another 50 or 60 people. So in addition to all the work that is presently going on, we have a bunch of ongoing projects. This new slate of projects is the funding that became available this last October. This is what the management conference approved last May. These projects are all now up and running. We're voting to take a look at them. Currently, we also have the bipartisan infrastructure law second tranche. That money is going to be released soon. We're in the final review with EPA, Region 6. We're going doing some fine tuning on the plan. Once we get their sign off, those projects will be up and running as well. I think y'all, it was a broken record. I just love what we have at the Nichols Farm with the native plant nursery. We're going through presently our 3rd expansion in the last 2 years. There is work being done right now that site work is being developed. We're going to have a new greenhouse. We're going to have a tremendous more capacity. And one of the really exciting things that's been since Ashley's been with us is that it is a hive of activity. There are groups coming all the time, but day in and day out, we have 5 to 6 Nichols students that are out there helping us with everything we do. And upcoming, speaking of the farm, Ashley does the Farm Fridays. That's a free walk-in for anybody who wants to come to volunteer, get their hands dirty, and help save the coast your own little way. The Precipice, which I mentioned, that is this weekend. You can make a nice New Orleans coast weekend out of it. Go to Swamp Fest and see some of Clinton's Palace play down at the zoo, and go check out the Precipice. We also have the title drafted calendar that will be distributed in about a month from now, early December. And this year, it's something we've never done before, but it's interesting. It's going to feature the geology and topography of the estuary, many different landforms and water types here, and their effect in the estuary, carved by water, and it's a very interesting look that we've never taken before. With that, I'll open up if anybody has any questions at this time. If not, you can ask a question anytime. Well, at the end, we're going to go through our presentations, and I'm going to ask the speakers after each presentation to allow some time for discussion and see if anybody has any questions. But does anybody have any questions for me at this time? Okay, thank you all very much, and thank you for being here.
All right, thank you, team. Next on our agenda is a report from Dr. Gary LaFleur for the BTNEP Foundation.
Hey everyone, just wanted to remind you what the Estuary Foundation does. You know, my day job is here at Nichols, but me and the board that work at the Barataria-Terrebonne Estuary Foundation, we volunteer to help support the things that BTNEP does. So we help support the funds. For instance, when BTNEP gets grants, oftentimes those grant funds are at the Estuary Foundation. We have an awesome bookkeeper, Linda, that helps us keep track of that. We also do that for people that are in the estuary, not necessarily part of the estuary program, like the folks at Jean Lafitte. They get grants. We also work as the fiscal agent for some of those grants. And so we can do that for anybody that's doing things that need to be done in the estuary. And wanted to report about something new that we're doing, and that is with a lot of the help from Dwayne Bourgeois, who's one of our board members, is that we're moving towards helping out with some mitigation banks. And so we can do two things at once with this. By supporting some mitigation banks in the estuary, we're able to help conserve some natural resources, some beautiful places, but we can also help support the work of the Estuary Foundation and BTNEP. So you're going to be hearing more about that in the future. The other thing that I wanted to say before I sat down was, I just wanted to say thanks again for coming to the White Boot Gala. We got a lot of support from everybody in the room. Some of y'all offered auction items. We appreciate that. And y'all were there to help celebrate the estuary during Estuary Week. SPARS was so generous that the people from SPARS bought tickets to go to their own restaurant, which I thought was a nice indicator of how much they support the estuary program. And so as the board, we're kind of the hosts of that. You probably saw us doing that. But it's hard to say how much work Nicole does behind the scenes. But most of y'all know that, but we just wanted to make sure that you understood that Nicole Babin pours her heart into that event. She makes it happen from year to year, and she doesn't get enough thanks, but we're just going to make sure that she has something on her desk this week to remind her that we really appreciate everything she does. Yeah. Thanks, Nicole. Okay, that's it with the Estuary Foundation, unless anyone has questions.
All right, thank you, Gary. For our presentations, our first one we have up is Mr. Brian Lazina from CPRA, and will give us a little update on what they did.
Morning, everybody. It's a little more formal than we were the last time I was here. It's always good to be here. I appreciate y'all having me. The turnout at these things is always exceptional, which is awesome to see. And we'll get into some areas I hope that this group, the estuary program, can also work a little more with CPRA on some of our items. So my name is Brian Lazina, CPRA, Administrator for Planning and Research. So a little bit about what that means. I have the good fortune to oversee the state's coastal master plan updates and monitoring. Also the large scale feasibility studies that we do, permitting, and involved in a lot of the environmental compliance and monitoring. So not going to get into a whole lot of structural protection issues today. Dwayne, I know, is here, but we're going to go over a few items I want to touch on some of the things that are in the state's coastal master plan. We just had a revision, the 2023 plan. We're very proud of. Looks a little different than we've done in the past. And I just want to show kind of an overview on that, and then dive a little deeper specifically into two things that are going on. I think really are close to this program as well. So as I mentioned, we are now on our 4th iteration of the state's coastal master plan, just passed this year, and just to show a few things on the importance of the Barataria-Terrebonne system, we know to the state, to the country, but also you can see that reflected in the projects that are listed in this year's, or this iteration of the state's coastal master plan. And so up there, I know it's hard to see, this is the Barataria system highlighted, and you can see this area pretty much has everything that the state's coastal program does, from ridge restoration, from barrier island sediment diversions, structural protection, marsh creation, all of those things, oysters, hydro, you name it, everything, each one of these icons down here, whether it's a fixed project or programmatic, happens in this basin, and we're very proud, and you'll see that we've put a lot of resources into the basin, this particular basin lately, and look to do that in the future. And then similarly on the Terrebonne side, all the way to Point of Fur, you can see same kind of thing. We get into a lot more some smaller scale hydrologic restoration projects and of course protection projects. You can see up on the screen, but still plans for a lot of marsh creation, and then something a little different you saw in this year's plan, and so right through here is kind of a land bridge concept. So before we have a lot of marsh creation features, and those are, you know, integrated protection and restoration, but really looking at helping some of these estuaries stay estuaries, looking at maybe making a little more of a solid barrier than we would have normally. Normally in a plan formulation, we'd look, if it was 1 or 2 feet deep, great. If it was more than that, it gets to be cost prohibitive on some things. But what we're also looking at is if you keep those connections open and those connections are too wide, we're getting into the same trouble that we had in there. We want to make sure that the investment is sustainable, but the project ultimately is adding to the sustainability of the system. So we're fortunate. We're trying to identify some funds right now to kind of kickstart these things, get a little more feasibility level study. One of the things we try to do is always have a menu of projects and items on hand, as you well know. Even for the state, you know, funding comes and goes. Funding is sporadic, and you want to be able to take advantage of that. And that's really what the state's coastal plan has been able to do is have that ready to go when the money arrives. Not going to stay with the master plan too much, but just did want to make, we're continually doing outreach on the master plan. For those of you that haven't seen it, there's a data viewer on there. You can do it on the phone, you can do it on the computer. Or what I really wanted to say with this group is we also have, you can see the master plan data access portal. And that's something we're doing now. Instead of just looking at some of the outputs that you would get from the master plan, those of you that work in the field or have friends that do, you can actually get in and start digging into the data a little more and kind of query that a little differently on there. And so for a lot of folks, I think that's gonna be a big help. It's all on the CPRA website, coastal.la.gov, and I encourage you to take a look at that. So what do we have going on right now? And I'm not going to hit every one of these dots. I just want to kind of show and highlight the bottom of the screen there, but planning, engineering, design, I know the colors are probably hard to see, but obviously if you kind of focus on this color construction, you can see throughout the 2 basins, we have a lot of projects going on. So and I'll show pictures, 1 or 2 pictures of some, from large scale marsh creation, and in this basin, and Terrebonne Basin within the, at least geography of the estuary program, things we've said a lot was largest ever so far. And we've said that a lot over the couple of years, and that's been awesome to do. Largest ever beach restoration, largest ever marsh creation has been in the estuary program footprint on there. So we're happy that a lot of engineering and design going on, a lot of construction, as I mentioned, going on, and looking forward to doing more of that in the future. But just to get an idea, it really all phases on there. So completed projects all the way to some, like I mentioned, we have in planning or feasibility level design. So some to that passed, and I know a few folks were out there. Up here this is the Spanish Pass project that was recently completed down just above Venice, which was awesome to see, to be able to drive on this if you got a chance to do. But again, a ridge and nourishment feature on there. The Trinity projects, the whole Terrebonne system, largest ever at the time on there, and hopefully we get to say that a bunch, has just been awesome to do on it. And then this was large scale marsh creation up in Lake Bourne. I'm sorry, too many projects going on, but up in Barataria, just south of the feed on there. Again, this one at the time was the largest at about 1,200 acres on there. Proud to say there's another one coming along on the east side that's the largest, but we continue to do work. I want to say it's about, we have plans just in the Barataria system. Next coming years, past few, it's about 5,000 acres of marsh addition into the basin, or habitat addition is probably a better way to say it. And then we have a few other ones coming up that are in engineering design, really Raccoon Island, some other work we're doing there, habitat work. And if you've noticed, because of NERDA funding, because of DWH funding, we've been able to branch out a little bit more and not just building projects like going in and restoring beach, but looking at projects on behalf of some of the natural resources. So we built a lot of marsh. We built a lot of marsh, good marsh elevations, but it's never been we've gone in there and said, okay, what about eating concerns? What do we want to do to add for bird or oyster or other? And so we've been able to do that a little bit with this funding, not a little bit, a lot, and really tailor some of the larger projects to have the inclusion of that. So we build for habitat, but I can really say now we can really build for habitat on there and take a direct look at that. And then some other projects in the Terrebonne Basin that was mentioned, plant nursery and ridge formation, which we've gotten to do a lot more of these now with funding, large scale ridge restoration. And of course, that's a feature, unfortunately, we're losing in coastal Louisiana, an important feature, and we're able to restore that. So looking forward to getting these projects off within the estuary program's footprint. So a little deeper dive into two things. One, like T. Brad said, when he called it nerd here, I've spent some time with the folks. I had no idea. I had no idea. It's always research reserve with me. That's what I tend to stick with. But if you looked a little while back, about 2 years ago, you wouldn't see this Louisiana shade filled in, because we were the only coastal state without a research reserve in the entire program. And that was for a couple of reasons that luckily I don't have to dive into. I'm not a political appointee, so I don't have to worry about that. But currently, we are going through the process of adding Louisiana's first research reserve into the program. And you can see here sort of the outline of the other reserves, and some states have several, but within the program itself. So what exactly is that? It's very similar to what we're sitting and speaking to today. It's a state-federal partnership on there. This is a NOAA program, separate from the EPA program that we're currently in right here. But again, state-federal partnership. You can see the logos up there, Longcon Board of Regents, and that's who the governor has designated currently to serve as the management entity on behalf of the state. So a little background, I'm standing up here talking about this because when we first get this thing spearheaded through the process, it has a permitting process, NEPA compliance, all the things you would normally associate with a project, but again with this program. But all the groundwork, we have a pretty good hand at doing that. So the governor had asked the CPRA to sort of carry the torch for that for a while until we get to a point now where we're starting to work more with Dr. Robertson and then hand that off in the future. But so you see the state role is land ownership and management. They're responsible for staffing of the reserves, the implementation of the program, and then there's a 30% match that the state would supply for that. And the federal role, very similar, national program and policy guidance, sort of that at DC level overall funding. This program obviously is like a lot of federal programs challenged for funding, so it's always good to have this sort of folks there. And there's another foundation speaking on behalf of the reserve system on there, but also providing technical assistance, coordination, and that all important 70% component of that there. And if you didn't know, it was actually under NOAA, and it's in Office of Coastal Management. So this is not NOAA Fisheries, this is on the ocean side. And so they have the reserve program here there. So what's involved in the research reserve? Again, a lot of this is going to seem very familiar to you, but these are the system-wide and national programs. So there's a system-wide monitoring program, and obviously one of the draws that NOAA sees, just like EPA sees, the state of Louisiana has a lot of invested into monitoring in the coastal area of the state, and this can only add to that and take advantage of that. And so that's an awesome thing, similar to what we do here. A coastal training program, the K through 12 education program. There's a graduate research fellowship, and then a science collaborative. So geography, the picture up there is going to be hard to see, but this is in a Chapel based research reserve. This right here is what was nominated basically by the governor in the package to say, okay, let's start the process. Here's what we whittled down to. The state whittled down from a bunch of different geographic contenders, left to right on the map, to do this. And really what we were trying to capture was something unique to the research reserve system, and something that we don't have a whole lot here is growing land, right? Is riverine delta system, this active delta system that you don't see in really any of the other reserves on there, and certainly not in the northern Gulf of Mexico on these spots to the scale that we have, especially here. So you can see, and I'll tell you the colors on there. There's a core and there's a buffer area, a little bit different management. This is going to change. Like I said, this was an ambitious cut at what we did. We wanted to do that. This will go through the NEPA process. It goes through the EIS, just like a whole bunch of things. So there's opportunities there for alternatives. But really, again, it's focusing on right here where you see the Chapel Delta WMA, but really honing in on the main delta, the Wax Lake Delta side, because that's what we're trying to capture, is all those processes that you can't get at another estuarine research reserve. And then, of course, some of the area. The good thing is, we're hopeful it provides opportunities to sort of grow everybody's mission on there. The geography is different, the responsibilities are different, the makeup's a little bit different, and so it'll be, I think, a good thing, especially to have that housed under the same management entity here to really be able to make that work and take full advantage of the Board of Regents system. So the process, I mentioned already, a letter of interest from the governor. We've been through site selection and nomination, a lot of public input, a lot of folks very passionate one way or the other on these. And then right now we're in this phase right here. So we've had scoping meetings. We're in the process of drafting the environmental impact statement. We had hoped by this point in the process to kind of be there. You know, it would have been great to get this done under Governor Edwards' term. He sort of spearheaded this through there, and that would have been awesome. There's a lot of moving pieces on here, a lot of bureaucracy. I don't think, you know, I'm telling anybody that doesn't have a duty dealing with that. So it's running a little behind, and just some unique issues into Louisiana. We're our working coast, obviously. You don't see that in some other places. So that presented some few challenges for us to work around, because one of the things we have to do is ensure that we are responsible for all our stakeholders, whether or not it's a commercial fisherman, bird watching, you know, offshore oil and gas. All of those things are important to Louisiana, and we want to make sure that's taken care of. But also want to see this thing move forward as fast as we can. And then once that goes, you'll have designation and operations in an MOU. So again, right now we're going through the EIS. We are writing the initial draft management plan for the reserve, and starting to get into some of the nuts and bolts on that. All right, shifting gears a lot. I want to give some updates on the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion. Again, another keystone project in the state's coastal program. This one, a big one, an important one, especially for the estuary program. If you haven't ever seen the schematic on the about it, here it is on the left. Just north of the town of Ironton, south of the Lions Refinery in the Barataria Bay. And some of you were there, and I appreciate that, but we just had the official groundbreaking for this project. And so I want to get into a little bit on where we are with this, because I know you guys get a lot of, you have a lot of comments, you get a lot of comments and about the process, and this one's a big one. This one changes people, this changes places. and we want to make sure that we get information out, especially to this group, since you have such a diverse stakeholders, like myself, like fishermen in the management conference. So I want to touch just a bit, because this is sort of the timely thing is mitigation and stewardship measures surrounding the diversion on here, and we're starting to roll these out. So obviously, I can sit here and talk for days and weeks about the positive benefits, of this project. I think, you know, we've done that, it's out there. I really want to talk about, okay, but now what does it mean to the citizens, and where are we going to make sure this information's out there? So one of the things was structural improvements, structural needs that we might have because of changes in water elevation because of the diversion operations. When the diversion is fully running, 75,000 CFS of water, it's a lot, right, into the basin on there. So we do anticipate some potential changes to water levels that we're going to address. The upside is that money was part of the construction funding, so it's there. We get that question a lot from residents. You're just going to do this and try and find it. It's found. It's there with construction funding, and we'll be able to do that. And for a lot of these communities outside of levee protection, this is actually going to add to the longevity of these communities. We started this obviously before Hurricane Ida, and I can tell you that things are different now in people's brains before and after Ida on what they're going to have to do in the future with or without this project on there. So not going to go into any depth and detail. We can certainly do more. I can talk with you more, but just to kind of show a range of activities that you're going to see, and these are not specific to the community. Some are going to experience maybe a little more water, like Myrtle Grove. So you see some structural issues there, structural protection measures, mostly bulkheading and raising. Things look a little different when you get in a medium sort of section, Happy Jack, Lake Hermitage, Susie Bayou, all of those that are mostly elevated homes, but really trying to protect the critical infrastructure, sewer, water, those things from repetitive flooding. And then in the Grand Bayou community, really looking at some, not a huge water level thing, but we're looking at ways to try and make sure that community stays not just physically intact, but culturally intact and in communication with each other. So looking at some things, boardwalks, other projects, looked at floating gardens. We had a competition for those, sewer, septic, and of course, ways that to help them already adjust to coastal changes that they have to do, literally, the island community on there. So the other big one, stewardship measures you'll hear from the state is, you'll hear fishery stewardship measures. Now, these are twofold. This is to really kind of help to address changes that the project is going to bring and that the future is going to bring as well. And this is both for the fishers and the actual organisms on there. So right now in the state of Louisiana, through CPRA and this program and on behalf of the federal trustees, is about $54 million that's going to go to either habitat restoration or programs to help fishers through this process. And you can see the breakdown, 32 million for oysters, and that is a wide range of techniques available because with oysters, we can make more oysters. So it's able to help the industry, but at the same time, help to restore habitat, hopefully in some of the areas of Barataria Basin and then some of the adjacent basins, the Terrebonne included on there. And then some other things that are direct to trying to help out the alternative oyster culture program. That's the state has tried to move along a little bit, and some other habitat features. 17 million for shrimp. This is largely for fisheries aid on there. We're not going to hatchery raise shrimp. That's a whole other issue that I'll get into in a minute. But likely we're going to see those changes. You know, we anticipate those changes, especially for the brown shrimp fishery. If you're used to fishing on the backside of the peak, things are going to change on there, and we want to help fishers adjust to that. And again, not only the project, but where we're going to see, and then some other monies, really outreach and engagement to not necessarily address negative impacts, but sort of help in other markets that we're going to see available because of other fisheries that are going to be available with the changing conditions that we've seen in some of the other areas out in western Louisiana. And then at the bottom, one of the big ones we're going to have, the breakdown is about $2 million for workforce development. If folks are looking to transition, we've had a lot of input from the fishers about business planning. You know, it was amazing when, I can't say how many meetings we've had, but that comes up a lot, you know, to be a self-employed fisher and not have the time to be able to do that is a really big deal. And then The bottom is, subsistence fishing or roadside, so $1 million, and we're working with the parish of Clackamas to try and put facilities in that folks can access without a boat. As we all know, a lot of private land ownership here, and it's hard to have that kind of access, so we're looking to do that. Now, the background on these, I'm proud to say, whether the industries like the project or not, this is their input. These are their suggestions. This is not the state through, this is certainly not right, but the state coming through and saying, this is what we see for your future. We're here to help. This was really an industry-driven, individual-driven, tens of thousands of surveys, and feels like about the same number of meetings to really get to these items on here. And there's some fluidity here, but we look forward to doing that. So a lot of those will happen before the diversion project. Of course, where we are in the timeline, we're 7, 8 years away from any kind of large-scale operation for the project, but we'd like to take advantage of getting those on the ground because we need to have an effect of those before the project changes things. But there's some money right now, about $10 million, if you heard, we've moved forward because we see there's needs in these fisheries, regardless of the project, that are really threatening not only a way of life here, but kind of an existence for some folks. And so what we've done is move some things around to take advantage of some early works. $6 million to really jumpstart some reefs in oyster public grounds. So again, $1 spent now on an oyster resource is paying way more into the future than if we waited and harvest after a year, so we can get a bunch of these going. Alternative oyster culture, looking at all land production at the state's hatchery at Grand Isle, some redundancy. And down here you see the subsistence I mentioned, the Clackamas will move that forward. But the big one that sort of drove this is in brown shrimp marketing. And I know a lot of you have posted this. You see it's really a challenging time. Well, shucks, the last 20-something years has been a challenging time for the shrimp industry. But this right now is really critical. And so I'm happy to say we're going to take $2 million of those marketing monies, really move that forward, help this industry sort of promote, to see if we can't get a little more going for the industry, see what we can do with prices and some other activities. And we're working hand in hand with the industry, especially through the Shrimp Task Force on this, to try and get this out the door as soon as possible. Because like I said, these monies are in hand. They're not only funded, but this is a in hand for us, so we're able to move pretty fast on getting these done. And then lastly, what you're going to see, and primarily led by NOAA, is a huge marine mammal program in the Barataria system, specifically on there. A lot of the monies from the project will go to the statewide stranding program. It'll go to statewide interaction and public messaging around mitigation. But a lot of that, most of that is going to stay in the Barataria system to set up a surveillance network. And then NOAA's looking right now to look at intervention measures. So not just going and counting and seeing if there's any kind of dolphins that have been impacted, but what can we do maybe to interject in those if we do see sick individuals and others. So this, over the whole suite of projects that I mentioned for marine mammals in itself is about a $60 million project. The monitoring alone, $20 million. So this is a 20-year process. Management, not going to check these boxes, just looks really cool up there, like we have an idea, we know, but this is where this group is going to come in to this particular project. So just like anything else, and actually more so than most projects, this is set up. We are going into monitoring. We are putting in N numbers of new stations to really be able to adaptively manage this project. And that comes from not only the monitoring we see on the ground, but from input on stakeholders, especially groups like this that get the entire breadth of it, but then also have that sort of intrinsic knowledge on your own. And so there's the ability to do that. We have obviously a responsibility to operate the project for those benefits, right? We want to, it's an expensive project. It's a large scale project. We want to make sure we realize those benefits. But we also have a commitment in that if we can realize those benefits, or maybe realize 99% of those benefits and change operations a little bit and keep some refugia for certain things, keep the basin a little bit different, we want to be able to take that opportunity, and of course, that starts with putting stations on the ground now, and then a robust system of governance that allows for that input, and really that nimbleness to be able to adaptively manage this on an annual and certainly a 5-year or better period on there. So a lot of efforts going into this. You'll hear more about it. We'll certainly look to the estuary program here to be a part of that. And then lastly, ones I'll be back for input if you haven't heard. I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but the Corps has a very large 5-year, $25 million study to really reimagine the operations of the lower river. And this is something that the state of Louisiana will be a partner in. We don't have to cost share, but at the same time, we'll kind of be there to make sure Louisiana's interest. There's 7 states involved, so you know where that could go with everybody tugging. But what I'm going to do is make sure that this group, having such a large stake in here, is at the table for what the state of Louisiana's concerns are. So this is, again, a really big one. This is a game changer. This is 100 years of operations potentially on the table to look at. We're going to be out there making sure that we advocate for the third leg of the Corps' mission, the environment side, as much as the flood control and navigation side. And then hopefully we have some meetings that we're holding. We have one already, but then there's one coming up on the 9th. If you're familiar with CPRA and what we do, you can skip it. If you have folks that really haven't heard of us and we get to a lot of communities you haven't, that's really what this is all about. They're going to show some projects local to the area. They're going to just give an update on master plan viewer. But again, if you have folks or yourself that really want to just a little more, we'll have a lot of folks from the agency you can interact one-on-one with and ask questions. And then you can see that's going to be down in cutoff next week to the day on here. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions anybody might have. And thanks for the time.
All right, everybody, I have a question. Seriously, we're gonna ask a question.
Do you know about the time?
The research reserve? Yeah. So she asked, can you hear about the timeline, what might be on there? We're kind of in the, we have a draft of the environmental impact statement ready to go. We're working on finalizing the draft of the management plan with input from Lumcon. So we're hopeful that it's moves along in the next month or so on there. So that will go to NOAA. We'll have to go through public process, but I'm hoping months here, not years like it has been already. It's been a little while, so I think we got some good momentum. I'm meeting with the leadership pretty soon, so we can get that out of the door.
All right, thank you, Brian. Okay, up next, we're going to hear from Robert Dobbs from Louisiana Department of Wildlife Fisheries to talk about some migratory birds.
All right, well, thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to y'all today. So my name is Robert Dobbs. I represent the Wildlife Diversity Program of the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Just real briefly, the Wildlife Diversity Program, we're primarily concerned with non-game species. We identify, prioritize species of greatest conservation need, again, primarily non-game. We update and implement the state's wildlife action plan, which is designed for the conservation of non-game species. I am primarily concerned with non-game birds. And so today, I want to talk about coastal and migratory birds in Louisiana, status, vulnerability, and the importance of coastal and nearshore habitats. But I will say that's a bit of a cryptic title because much of what I'm going to talk about revolves around the department's concerns with the development of nearshore wind energy. So that's development of wind energy in state waters. I want to make sure that I differentiate that from more offshore wind energy development. We're really concerned about wind energy development within the 0 to 3 miles of the immediate coast. One more thing I want to emphasize before I get started is that this is not an anti-wind talk. We're not anti-wind by any stretch. fully realize that development of green energy is ultimately incredibly important for the conservation of these birds that I'm going to talk about today. But what I do want to convey, of course, you know, as I mentioned, is our concern with how nearshore wind is developed and implemented, and identify a number of information gaps that currently sort of restrict our understanding of potential impacts. So, you know, starting a step back, why are we here at all? We're honestly in the midst of a biodiversity crisis in North America with respect to birds. More than half of U.S. birds are in decline. We've lost we've had about a net loss of nearly 3 billion birds in the last 50 years. And so, you know, why is it happening? There are many reasons for these declines. Habitat loss is way up there. Free roaming cats, feral cats is way up there, but also collisions is a big deal. Collisions with buildings, with towers, and in fact, also with wind turbines. Which species are declining? It's important to note that not all species are declining. Waterfowl, for example, and water birds really sort of in general are actually doing quite well, and that's in large part due to how we as a society has valued wetland conservation and waterfowl conservation over the last 50, 40 years. But a number of other gills, in fact, most other gills, are declining, and some are sharply declining. For example, eastern forest birds in North America. I'm showing prairie warbler here as an example. Those birds are declining by about 27% over the last 50 years. Things like grassland birds and shorebirds, which I'm showing in the bottom left here with spot sparrow and stilt sandpipers. Those two gills are declining probably more than any others. We've lost about 33% and 34% of shorebirds and grassland birds respectively. And it's important to realize that these are Louisiana birds, right? Most of us think of Louisiana birds as, like I mentioned, waterfowl or herons and egrets. And, you know, that's true. But these three gills right here that I've chosen to emphasize due to population decline, that represents about 60% of our Louisiana birds. So this is a major component of our birds that we're concerned about. Coastal and nearshore Louisiana are exceptionally important, I think, you know, as everybody probably realizes for birds, because we lie at the heart of the Mississippi Flyway. We also get birds from farther west in the Central Flyway. We have two migration routes coming up from the tropics in North America that sort of crossroads in Louisiana. One is the Trans-Gulf route, which I'm going to talk a fair bit about. And that's shown in orange here, the arrows are pointed north. This is spring migration. Essentially, the same thing happens in fall. These birds are crossing over the open Gulf of Mexico. There's another group of birds that sort of come around the coastal end of Mexico and sort of meet these birds in Louisiana. Trans-Gulf migrants, it's important to realize how sort of this system works a little bit. These birds primarily migrate at night. Long distance migrant birds migrate primarily at night. They use celestial cues for navigation, at least in part. And so, you know, birds in the Yucatan Peninsula that are about to migrate north in spring, they leave at about nightfall, sunset just thereafter, right? And so they fly through the night. It's such a long distance to get to the northern Gulf Coast that they're still flying the following day, right? And so they find themselves over the open Gulf sometime morning, mid-morning, and make landfall sometime midday, early afternoon, or in the evening. And it's important to note here, and I'll touch on this again, that conditions that the birds experience over the Gulf are exceptionally important in how that actually happens, when they actually are able to make landfall. If they have headwinds, if they have thunderstorms out over the Gulf or near shore waters, that delays their arrival, so they may be, in fact, migrating at night by the time they get here. It also pushes them to flying at a very low altitude relative to what they might normally fly. There's an exceptionally high diversity of migratory birds that utilize coastal and nearshore Louisiana. 330 bird species, more or less, of 55 families use our coastal water, airspace, habitat, terrestrial habitat at some point in their annual cycle. I simply chose 5 birds here that are sort of show a range of variation in, you know, their sort of habitat use, lifestyle, life history. I'm showing a nighthawk, common nighthawk, a whimbrel, which is a shorebird, which we talked about, swallow-tailed kite, that's kind of an iconic Louisiana species, and a wood thrush and a planetary warbler. Some of these birds are primarily flying over the coastal waters or the coastal habitats during spring, and then again in fall, or maybe not in fall at all. And then they're not here the rest of the year. Others are migrating through in big numbers in spring, and then some of those populations stay for the whole summer. Same thing sort of happens in fall. Some of the birds stay all winter, others don't. There's a very wide diversity in how the birds use these habitats is kind of the point here. Over the last 20 or so years, technologies have really allowed us to really start to understand how individual birds use space. I've just taken a few examples from those previous birds of how individuals tagged with satellite tags or light level geolocators can teach us about how they're actually using the space. Say, for example, coastal zone of Louisiana. So common nighthawks breed across North America, and they winter over a large area of South America, but they sort of converge, bottleneck over the Gulf of Mexico during migration. We know these birds are flying over our coastal airspace. They actually breed on our coastal beaches and headlands of barrier islands. For planetary warblers, that's another species of concern. These are all species of conservation concern. Really neat study a few years ago where these birds were tagged with light level geolocators, which it's sort of a not quite as an accurate way to determine pinpoint localities, but it does so reasonably well. These birds breed in South Louisiana. They migrate through our coastal zone, over our coastal airspace, across the Gulf of Mexico, and then go to their tropical wintering grounds. Whimbrels in the bottom left here have very different spring and versus fall migratory pathways. In the fall, they migrate across the Atlantic coast and down in South America. But in the spring, they come back up again through the Gulf of Mexico. We have a very important migratory stopover and staging site right along our coast that the birds use by the thousands during spring migration. So that just sort of emphasizes, highlights a few examples of how individually tagged birds, we know exactly, how they're using our coastal zone. But to understand or to monitor migration at a bigger scale, we can't tag all the birds with satellite or GPS transmitters, but we can use weather radar as a tool to monitor migration, the intensity of migration, the direction of migration. And this has been going on for a number of years, probably 50 years or so. Maybe even 60. And basically you have a weather radar here, I'm showing in the upper left here, and basically that beam sort of, it does its thing, it scans a certain radius of the sky over and over and over again. And it picks up rain, it picks up weather, it picks up insects, but it really picks up birds really well. And it produces a really distinct signal, especially when there's a fairly significant migratory flight, which I'm showing in the bottom right here. This is a series of images from the Lake Charles radar throughout a good, spring migration. There's a lot of migration traffic going on. And like I said, in the morning, those birds are not quite across the Gulf of Mexico yet, so they're not being picked up yet. But by late morning, midday, 11 and 1 p.m., you start to see birds really entering that southern end of the radar feed. By later in the afternoon, you have a classic donut shape. And it's very evenly pixelated. If there was rain involved, you'd have more heterogeneous signals. But anyway, when the birds are migrating over or through the entire radar space, you have that donut shape. The birds are going around to the east side of the beam, the western edge of the radius of the beam, and ultimately the northern part of the beam. And so there's, another important part of this is that these birds are being picked up on the northern side of the beam. This is a good, clear weather day, probably a south wind. The birds are able to fly completely over the radar, and probably at high altitude and landing, probably somewhere in North Louisiana. But like I mentioned before, a really important component of this, when you have north winds with a spring cold front, you have offshore rain events, squalls, thunderstorms, that will delay all of this and it will force the birds to fly very low to land right on the immediate coast or on, for example, oil and gas platforms offshore, any refuge they might be able to find. This is a result from a study that came out a couple of years ago where authors quantified spring migration traffic over 21 years of radar data from 11 radar stations across the northern Gulf Coast of Texas to Florida. And a couple of things to emphasize here. First of all, an estimated 2.1 billion birds cross over the Gulf every year on average. Importantly, about half of this occurred during only an 18-day period during spring. 19 April to 7 May, that's the peak. And that has really important applications for how we might implement some best management practices, down the road, if and when wind energy is developed in state waters. And finally, the western Gulf of Mexico, based on these analyses, the western Gulf of Mexico is really the primary sort of pathway for trans-Gulf migrants. Western Gulf has about 5.4 higher passage rate than areas farther east in the Gulf. So the western Gulf, which is about here where we sit now, west, is really the most important sort of trans-Gulf migratory area. And so, our concerns are probably obvious based on everything that I've talked about over the last couple minutes. We're really concerned about collisions, the risk of collision with trans-Gulf migrants either crossing over in spring or, like I said, in fall. One of the most important things that I want to convey here is that this is a huge data gap. There's really no precedent for evaluating effects of wind turbines on trans-Gulf migrant birds or on any sort of barrier crossing of migrants at the magnitude of the Western Gulf. The Western Gulf is, the Gulf in general, is one of the most significant areas for bird migration, really in the world. The vast majority of birds that breed in eastern North America and across the boreal forests in Canada come through the Gulf of Mexico. We know that collisions with oil platforms can be significant. There's been work done with personnel on platforms in the late 90s, early 2000s, where estimates, up to 200,000 and 320,000 deaths per year can occur on those platforms. Again, I mentioned arriving and departing migrants may be expected within the rotor sweep zone of turbines under poor conditions when they're forced down due to poor weather conditions. These images are from a lighthouse in the Gulf of Maine, but similar images are often found on oil platforms in the Gulf of Maine. So now I want to shift from talking about purely migratory birds that are crossing that airspace of the nearshore waters to talking about some of our coastal water birds and some of our kind of different concerns that are related to those birds. So first I want to talk about threatened and endangered species. We have two species of threatened shorebirds that spend the non-breeding season on our coast. And these birds are on our barrier islands, our mainland beaches, our headlands, and associated intertidal wetlands with those habitats. And I mentioned that they're here during their non-breeding season, but that's actually essentially all of the year. So piping plover is one bird. Those birds finish up breeding in June, early July. They're already on our coast by late July, and they spend the entire year here until about April. And at which point they go back to breed in the Great Plains and Great Lakes. Great knot is our other species. These birds breed much farther north, and they're here from about September through about May, with some non-breeding birds spending the entire year here. So these birds are primarily right on that coast. Like I mentioned, they're foraging, they're loafing, they're experiencing, seeking shelter right along the coast on those actual terrestrial habitats. But we do know that they move among areas within Louisiana. They move, for example, based on work that BTNEP has been involved in heavily between Caminata Headland, Grand Isle, and the Shotwater Island chain. And there's also evidence that they move at least to some degree between Louisiana and Texas. Same with piping plover. We know that they move among areas within Louisiana, within that non-breeding season. But we don't know how they do it. We don't know if they're following the exact coastline or if they're perhaps cutting across our state waters, at which risk of collision could be a concern. Equally importantly, our colonial nesting water birds that the state hosts. We host really important populations of a number of colonial nesting species. This is information that came out a few years ago where authors estimated Louisiana breeding population sizes of a number of species and put that in the context of broader spatial scale. So the northern Gulf, the continental, and in some cases locally. Virtually all these species are species of conservation concern. They're all declining. Sandwich tern is a species of concern. Estimated Louisiana population, 75,000 breeding birds. That is about 83% of the birds in the Northern Gulf. And I don't need to go through this whole list. It's sort of the same sort of pattern for all these species. Royal terns, brown pelicans, Louisiana hosts about half of the breeding birds in the Northern Gulf. And that's really because, southeast Louisiana in particular, the Deltaic Plain is comprised of habitats, island habitats that are critical for these birds. These birds need very specific island habitats that are largely free of mammalian predators to reproduce. And southeast Louisiana has that in abundance. This is a map showing our colony locations for all these birds on the right here: brown pelican, red egret, gold-billed tern, cascade tern. Virtually all those birds that I showed in the previous slide. These are our colony locations from 2015 to 2021, and it's essentially, continuously the immediate coast of all of southeast Louisiana. Not to say that we don't have colonial water birds breeding on our beaches in western Louisiana, because we do. Least terns breed throughout the mainland beaches of western Louisiana, but that's such a small species that's not picked up on the monitoring techniques that we use to monitor our colonial water birds in general. And so this is a huge concern, again, with respect to risk of collision, but also with respect to displacement perhaps. It's not known whether putting up wind turbines will somehow make that area unpalatable or unusable by these birds for foraging. It's also possible that by putting up wind turbines, we create places for the birds to rest. We create sort of an artificial reef area that might have better foraging, which could then attract the birds to those areas, which could again put them at risk of collision. Another really important part of this is that it's not so much important. It's not the proximity of our colonies to wind energy development is important. The turbine would not necessarily have to be right next to a colony to have an effect, right? We know that royal terns, for example, forage on average about 8 miles, up to 8 miles from the colony every day. So you have the colony with the nest. You have females incubating, males go out, or males incubate. The partner goes out every day, forages, finds food to bring back to the incubating bird. Once the chick hatches, birds are out foraging up to 8 miles away from the colony. And so if there are effects with collisions or displacement behavior, for example, that can affect productivity of the colony, which can have cascading effects on the population. We're not only concerned with respect to the biology of that, but also simply with respect to where we are investing resources for these birds, right? So we have 3 Deepwater Horizon related restoration projects, using bird allocated dollars. So these are island projects that have been implemented or currently being implemented specifically to benefit birds. One is Queen Beth near Grand Isle. Another project is in Terrebonne Bay near the Home Navigational Canal. That's the HMC Island project that is, I think, going to go to construction, I don't know, within the next year or so. And then Rapid Island in western Louisiana, which has been completed in the last couple of years. So we have these 3 projects where the state has invested Deepwater Horizon dollars, over $100 million. Ultimately, it'll be much more than that, towards the conservation of these very, very species. The department also has 6 coastal WMAs or refuges between Grand Isle and Cameron, which are managed at least in part for these colonial water birds. This is a wind energy risk assessment map put out by the non-government organization American Bird Conservancy. Red areas are of critical importance. Orange areas are of varying degrees of high importance. And then, so I think probably, what I've conveyed so far in this talk, this should make a lot of sense. If we were to, create a map like this, it would look essentially the same. So exceptionally important areas right along the coast, especially southeastern Louisiana, colonial water birds, high importance throughout the western Gulf, which highlights the importance of that trans-Gulf migratory corridor. And so you know, there are a lot of information gaps. It's really one of our biggest concerns. We simply don't have information with which to evaluate what these risks might be. I mentioned collision vulnerability. That's collision with the actual infrastructure of the wind turbine. Displacement vulnerability. You know, are areas associated with wind energy development somehow less available to the birds for foraging? Bird response to wind energy infrastructure, you know, data on that is really only available for offshore wind farms. There's been work done primarily in Europe, also off the east coast of the U.S., off the west coast of the U.S., but it's primarily based on far offshore wind energy, and it's primarily based on larger water birds and not associated with colonies, right? So there is some information, but there's virtually no information or very little information on colonial water birds near colony sites, in the vicinity of colony sites, or for these small bodied migratory birds that are making these long distance flights. And so some of our data needs, for migrants, we need specific information on flight altitude. Current information is sort of all over the map. It hasn't been collected in a targeted way. We would need things like small portable radar units offshore to actually measure, you know, the altitude of these birds when they're making these flights, how that might vary or how that does vary with respect to weather conditions and other things that can affect how the birds make those flights. For colonial water birds, we need more information on home range size, foraging distance, like I showed for the royal tern. There's a couple of examples. Royal tern, we have some information on brown pelican, but that's really about it. So we need more information from tracking studies using GPS or satellite transmitters to start allowing us to get at that, so that we can get some of this information to plug into these risk assessment models to better understand how birds might respond to this, what the risks actually are. This is sort of just a very brief summary of what I just said. I probably don't need to go through it, but I can leave it up if anybody has any questions or discussion.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Yep.
Robert, have you had a chance to present this information? Do you need the wind coalition to the groups that are working to promote offshore wind?
Yeah, we've made this presentation to the State Mineral and Energy Board. We've had one meeting with one of the companies that's interested in pursuing nearshore wind development, and that's about it at this point. You know, this is still pretty new. It's moving fast. It seems to be moving fast, but it's, you know, as far as the state coordinating how it's going to happen, it's pretty new, early stages.
Any other questions?
Are there any efforts, is anyone actually working towards getting some of the information or working to get some of the information that's lacking?
Yeah, so USGS is starting a project, and I can't speak to it in very informed terms because I've yet to have an opportunity to really talk to them, but they are starting a project using a mobile radar unit offshore. I think that's starting maybe this year. And to this point, other than a couple of graduate student projects, kind of like the Royal Tern work I mentioned, that are going on right now, that's about it at this point. We expect an uptick.
Okay, time for one more quick question. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
We've got a couple of speakers gonna come up together. We got Dr. Rodrigo Diaz and Michael Massany will be speaking about the Tallow Summit, I believe.
Appreciate you, Doug. Rodrigo's going to talk to you about a meeting we just had last week regarding biocontrol of the Chinese tallow tree. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with biocontrol. Fighting invasive species, there's a few different ways you can do it. Mechanically, garden snips or chainsaws or bulldozers or whatever. Chemically is unfortunately the main tool we have in the toolbox. We spray a lot of herbicides on terrestrial plants, on aquatic plants. But biocontrol is the one where, if done correctly, helps to just reestablish that natural system of checks and balances for a species that's sort of reproducing out of control. You may be very familiar with the Salvinia weevil. Sorry, was I not loud enough? Thank you. We worked with Dr. Diaz, BTNEP has worked with Dr. Diaz with LSU entomology on several different projects regarding the Salvinia weevil, optimizing placement of weevils for management, and we have an upcoming project looking at remote sensing of Salvinia. But there's other biocontrol agents for other species. Dr. Diaz also worked with the air potato beetle. And, you know, there's horror stories in the past of bringing an organism in to control another organism that was done irresponsibly. But these days, that doesn't happen anymore. We kind of learned our lessons. The USDA goes to the native range of the invasive species and finds, usually it's an insect-plant relationship, insects that are completely host-specific. They cannot survive on any other plant. They do the quarantine testing for construct for 10 years before these things get approved for release. So we are on the cusp of the release of not one, but two biocontrol agents for Chinese tallow. Chinese tallow tree is a scourge of the southern forests. I'm sure you're all familiar with the popcorn tree or chicken tree. It has a lot of common names. But unexpectedly to most of us, some significant opposition came from the honeybee producers. And so the goal of this meeting that Rodrigo and I organized with a gentleman from USDA and another gentleman from Harvard University was to sort of get on the same page, present the information to the beekeepers and honey producers, and see if we could sort of moderate their opposition. They did threaten lawsuits, and they're afraid that this biocontrol insect is going to damage their industry. So that was the point of the meeting, and Rodrigo put a presentation together to give you an update and sort of the debrief of the meeting. Dr. Diaz, he's also an artist.
Thank you, Michael. That was a great introduction. So good morning, everyone. Fantastic. So with that background, our idea is with this meeting is, we have this opposition from the honeybee keepers. So our idea was to have this meeting to convey information about what we know about the impacts of the plan, what is the expectation of the biocontrol agent, and how we can start a conversation so we avoid these lawsuits and we can move forward with the potential release of these new biocontrol agents. So basically, it comes to this. USDA APHIS is the agency that regulates the release of biocontrol agents. Okay? The honeybee keepers say that, if this goes forward, they may create a lawsuit against APHIS. So APHIS from the top administrator say, hey, we need to hold on the release. We need to wait and reassess and see how we can communicate with the honeybee keepers, right? So that's the context that we're dealing with. So I would invite you, and I will actually request some feedback from you guys, how we approach some of these issues about misinformation and how we solve these kind of issues with conflict of interest. So we have this wonderful meeting last week in geography, thanks to the National Park Service and Judy. We got several stakeholders in the same table. Luciana and Forestry, Wildlife Fisheries, EPRA, but more importantly, we have colleagues from the USDA working honeybees, as well as a representative from the Commercial Honeybees Association. And that was terrific, right? We got a chance to be in the same table. So again, the idea is to say, can we have a centralized ideas about what information is available to better assess what is this tree doing and the impacts to the industry, right? We have a wonderful meeting. So the first presentation was by Julie Whitbay from the National Park Service. So Julie gave us an update, how they manage Chinese tallow in that property. And something important that the honeybee keepers saw is that the numbers, the cost, how much cost to remove this tree from the property, some of the labor, the chemicals, the tools, the labor that is required to remove this tree from the environment. So that was interesting to share kind of hands-on how they manage this tree. And I think Julie conveyed a really hands-on experience saying, this is how much it's costing for the preserve to remove this tree and tries to barely try to keep it under control, right? So that was the presentation, Julie, kind of the first talk. Then we have Dr. Evan Seaman from Rice University. He's an ecologist that has extensive experience documenting the impact of tallow in southern forests. And he presented some straightforward data that is, if led unmanaged, these coastal prairies in Texas move from a native grassland to monocultures of tallow. The method was very clear. Think about 100 native grasses or communities moving from this a diverse area to basically monocultures of tallow. So he presented several data, maps showing this is an area in 1969, a grassland with different plant species, and by 1990, left unmanaged, all that area became a solid monoculture of Chinese tallow tree. So all the honeybee keepers realized that, this is what happens. Dr. Evan Seaman also mentioned, this is how they attempted to do some management practices. You need to go heavy on these areas when you get to this point of infestation, heavy machinery, herbicides, and mowing, very intensive. So he shared some data and pictures and graphs, how they can go from those monocultures to these diverse habitats, and then how they were able to recover. So it's possible. But some of the key messages, it was this. So you can manage tallow very intensive. You can recover those communities, but only if you have a lot of resources and in a limited area. So he made the point that, imagine land managers trying to do this level of intensive eradication, if you want to call it, at a massive scale when you're dealing with hundreds of acres infested with tallows. So it was very interesting how he made that strong point about, hey guys, if you want to control tallow, this is what may take in terms of effort and only possible at small scales. Now, we also hear a presentation from Dr. Dan Science from the Forest Service, and he presented some impact data saying how the leaf litter of tallow affects fauna and water quality. So he shows also experiments conducted by several graduate students in different setups. Basically, when you put these tallow leaves on the ground and they are exposed in the water, decay, there's some massive changes that are occurred. So he presented several sets of data on those in this regard, especially they seem to be very interested with amphibians. So these are some pictures of some of the amphibians that they are using, trying to understand, okay, these amphibians are in the water, that water is loaded with leaves of tallow in the winter, how that affects their performance. He presented lots and lots of data, but what is nice about this project is all this has been documented in peer-reviewed publications, but just to highlight one study that he presented is this. You can see here how the leaf litter of different species changes over time. You have pine, oak, and tallow. And this is basically in a matter of weeks how quickly tallow deteriorates what is in the leaf litter. And you can imagine all the chemicals or maybe the nutrients of the leaf just going fast. And in a matter of 4, 8, or 16 weeks, tallow just loses the biomass, just disintegrates compared with pine and oak. And that make us, all of us think, wow, tallow just has these massive changes just in this simple analysis that he was presenting. So it was very compelling, at least for me, that I don't work with amphibians to see how that leaf litter of tallow affects these organisms, right? And he presented, again, 20 slides of data documenting changes from water quality, the pH of the water lowers, the dissolved oxygen changes, and how that affects different aspects of just amphibians. So as an audience, we all thought, wow, if you just documented amphibians, think about the other impacts in other organisms in the food web present in these forested wetlands. So he's an active scientist, he's doing more research, thinking about how the microbes in the soil may be altered by these leaf litter created by tallow. So quite fascinating. We have the presentation from Mohammad from the Forest Service. He's very interested in the impact of tallow on forests, right? And And he presented this very nice graph about these feedback loops and made the case that, tallow is one of those high impact invaders because it produces a massive biomass, tremendous amount of seed that eventually affect, it basically outcompetes the native vegetation. And in these feedback loops, what it creates is altering the fire intensity in this ecosystem, literally creating the perfect habitat to displace the natives and create these aggressive invasion sites. And he made the point that, when you have this dominance of tallow, everything else, all the ecosystem services provided by the natives are displaced. So honeybee keepers and everyone, we got a chance to see this information, several pictures of the changes from grasslands, check the fire intensity of tallow and how that literally alters the community and definitely the regimes of these habitats. So very compelling information about this topic about fire regime changes and how the intensity just drastically alters the dynamics of these habitats. He also presented data from the evaluation of the impact of tallow control costs in the timber industry, and just highlighting that if you have a control threshold, for example, of 5%, you still have a tremendous cost associated with the management of tallow, only in timber industry. So it was very important to highlight, we do have documentation of about what is the predicted cost for the timber industry of the tallow management and showing different levels of thresholds of control. Now, the U.S. Army Corps sent Michael Saucier, that is active management at Guadalupe. He did mention how the Corps manages tallow in large areas, emphasizing the heavily used on herbicides, of course, and mechanical control, but of course, recognizing that, that there are some areas where, for example, they can only access with helicopters and how they just have to nuke some of these regions just to control tallow. He also emphasized that they need another tool of control, and they were open for basically asking for, we need biocontrol to complement another tool in the toolbox. Now, Greg Wheeler is the biological control scientist that developed these two agents, right? He presented, hey, these are the insects that we want to work. They have been approved by APHIS, by all the scientists they have reviewed. We have extensive data showing that they are specific to tallow and so on. And he was basically given an introduction to the biocontrol agents. But something perhaps that I can recognize that we need to do a better job was to communicate to the honeybee keepers saying, these agents are not going to harm any other plant species. And in addition, biocontrol kind of stresses the plant but doesn't eradicate. And the honeybee keepers, one of the major misconceptions that we noticed is that they are claiming that we are going to eradicate tallow, that tallow is going to disappear, and that these agents, because of the history of biocontrol and issues with all, they are going to be like the next kudzu, like it's going to attack everything. So I recognize that we need to approach them and say, there's basically these misconceptions, but not, I cannot send them 5 PDF files with data. They are not going to read it. So I think there's an opportunity to develop some different materials so we can approach them with simple messages. But this is some of the contention that we have. So hopefully we're going to develop those opportunities, and with Michael and other folk who are interested in develop simple messages, perhaps not the biocontrol practitioner telling them, this is how things work, but rather finding common, maybe someone on the honeybee industry that is interested to get a chance to learn how biocontrol works so communication improves. Then the next presentation was by the representative of the Honeybee Commercial Association, Steven. He presented extensive data, how important is honeybees for the agriculture, mentioning the importance of pollination, of course, production of honey, and how, it's very interesting how they move honey hives around the states in order to follow the pollination industry. Think about almonds in California, like the prime cash crop for honeybees because, that's where they need a lot of pollination. So he presented a lot of data about the importance of, the industry itself, how they are hiring people and how they are, they basically need, how critical they are for the economy. It's all good. And then he tried to make the connection how tallow helps the industry. And something that my brother, it was very clear, he got a picture of this. There is a term for honeybees that is this, a spring buildup. You start with one hive, and they need to build 2 or 3 in order to move those colonies and increase basically the colonies early in the season. The early in the season is the key thing. And that's where tallow seems to be that they plays a major role as a source of nectar and honey. Nectar and pollen, my bad, for this spring buildup of these colonies. So it wasn't, as a scientist, I would say there wasn't such a strong connection between these, but this is something that we need to address. And they are definitely working to try to communicate basically their findings. So I think the door is open to keep expanding about what is the connection between honeybee production and tallow flowering. So Jennifer is a student from our university, studying a little bit more about the importance of tallow for honeybees. She's a PhD student, has objectives to understand the abundance of tallow, what is the nutrient composition of tallow and the pollen, and the pesticide residue on these flowers. This is a picture of a honeybee on the tallow flowers. So he presented some data and said at least the preliminary data shows that yes, bees are using tallow flowers, and also they have high protein and lower lipids. And something important, you mentioned this, honeybee colonies grow both tallow, pollen and nectar, and the relative amount compared to pollen from other sources vary by location and time, meaning that when tallow is abundant in some areas in the southern part of Alabama, for example, honeybees are going to be using that plant. As tallow is not as aggressive in the center and north, they start using other plants. So the knowledge is a little bit building about what is the importance of tallow, right, for honeybees. Anthony, it's very interesting to understand, okay, what are the other insects that are using tallow flowers? He conducted a survey in different locations, and the result of these observations, what other insects arrive to these plants are, that by far, Hymenoptera, that is your bees, your bumblebees, and wasps, and so on, 43% of the visitors are in that order. And in less degree, we have Diptera, your flies, right? So he documented that. But something important that he mentioned is this. It seems to be that tallow is basically you have generalist pollinators that use tallow. As you can imagine, there are some native pollinators that are specialists. Some of our native plants rely on a specialist pollinator. Those, of course, are not using tallow. So he started making comparison, what are the pollinators seems to be the tallow, you have the generalists, they go after everything, right? But it seems to be that the connection may be that as tallow invades, all those native pollinators that are specialized on certain plants may be displaced. So he made emphasizing that connection. So data is coming up, but slowly we're building, that some sort of what is the data needed so we can kind of understand better the impact of tallow, especially to pollinators. And that is fascinating because you can imagine commercial honeybee keepers are in the extreme end that maybe they don't want to ask for biocontrol. At the same time, you have people that are really concerned about native pollinators. They would be interested in getting a more diverse community of plants to support those habitats. So it is very interesting to see this, among the pollinator groups, the difference in opinions perhaps about the role of tallow. Finally, this is the take-home message that we have. We have an awesome group now. We have working on this. There's definitely progress was made. We sat in the same table and we discussed this issue. But definitely we need to engage more in this conversation. There's a plan of having these meetings every year. We're meeting with the scientists of the USDA every month, but with among the larger group perhaps every year. We definitely presented evidence, this is what tallow is doing to our habitats. So the honeybee keepers also perhaps for the first time here, in a different variables, how we're observing, how the managers, how most of you see perhaps the impacts of tallow at different ecological levels. And we emphasize the importance that biocontrol guys were not eradicating plants, we're offering a different tool of management, and the agents are safe. They are not going to harm all the plant species. They are going to be only specialized in tallow. And I think something, the positive outcome is again that the honey beekeeper Stephen say, hey guys, maybe we can invite you to present at a national meeting the data that we have. And I think that's a positive development. And again, we're going to engage in the conversation because at the core of this is that we see a need for another tool of management tallow, and then we need to keep moving forward. But when you have a loss in the back, that's when something we have to kind of reformulate and correct this information. That's what we're trying to do right now. And that's what I would invite you to get some feedback from you guys, how we approach to a community person that say, hey, your insect is going to eat my tomato, you are going to kill my industry kind of thing. So that's like, hey, that's not going to happen. So I welcome your feedback. And with that, thanks for your attention.
All right, thank you, Dr. Diaz. Any questions for him?
I would just add one thing that, we are meeting monthly with the scientists from USDA. We had our first meeting yesterday. It sounded like one of the outcomes of that meeting is, the honey producers, the environmental assessment is not going to be enough for them. They want an economic assessment, and it looks like they're going to probably do that. So that I think is a positive development.
Yes. Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you. Oh, got one. Wait.
Was there a study that looks at the impact of the mechanical and the chemical control methods that are currently being used on tallow, how that affects honeybees?
No, I think there's not a study directly of that. I guess people evaluate how effective the herbicide and the mechanical control is in reducing tallow densities or aggressiveness and so on, but perhaps not directly the connection on that management directly to, I don't know, honeybee disease and so that. I'm not aware of a study of that connection.
Right, and on that note, I would also add that one thing this meeting really highlighted in my mind that I didn't really realize is how little of tallow invaded space is actually managed. So we spray some chemicals and do some mechanical control here and there when we have the resources. But meanwhile, it's invading millions and millions of acres everywhere else that isn't under management.
All right, thank you. All right, our next speaker is Dr. Bing Ching from University of Louisiana Lafayette. She's going to talk to us about harmful algal blooms.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Ming Liu. I'm assistant professor from University of Louisiana Lafayette. Today I'm going to talk about some of my water quality research, how it helps my current BTNEP project, and how I can move forward with future satellite missions for water quality monitoring in coastal Louisiana. So this is the topic I'm going to present, remote sensing for water quality monitoring in coastal Louisiana, leveraging machine learning and numerical modeling. And sitting on the first slide, they also have my collaborators. I would like to acknowledge their support, as well as the funding support from BTNEP and the EPA, as well as some other state and federal agencies. The funding support allow me to conduct and advance research in this field. Well, a little bit background about my study area, why I studied this area. As you have seen here, Louisiana, coastal Louisiana has so much environmental stressors. We have two big rivers, Mississippi River and Chapala River. They deliver tons of nutrients into the watershed. It causes eutrophication, harmful algal blooms, as well as hypoxia, as you have seen here from this map. And this is an example that we had in 2021 for oyster mortality events. Even we don't know exactly what the environmental factors cause those oyster mortality event. But as you have seen here from this little map about the hotspot of HABs, harmful algal blooms in coastal Louisiana, we know water qualities might play a role in the oyster mortality event. So like some other coastal area, Louisiana just standing in the front line of climate change. We have warming temperature, we have rising sea levels, and as well as stronger or more frequent storms. So phytoplankton always as a first community responding to these environmental stressors. In the meantime, Louisiana has another problem, and we have I think this is the old version of my slide. It's okay. I did put some of the map from the 2023 Coastal Master Plan for land loss for future 50 years. Those results from CPRA for different future scenarios. That means we have more and more open water in future. Also means we're probably gonna have more and more water quality issues. And Louisiana has been doing a fantastic job for the restorations to make our coast more resilient. And in the meantime, it's great opportunity for researchers to understand from an aquatic perspective, how our aquatic environment is responding to the restorations and climate change. So this is a really great timing for us to enhance our monitoring techniques for current conditions, as well as forecast the capabilities for future scenarios. So this is one of my research focus. I want to study current scenarios, current and future scenarios for phytoplankton community. So in my lab, we use lab and field experiments, and we also conduct remote sensing analysis in conjunction with numerical model simulations. So among these different approaches, I do want to emphasize the importance of remote sensing technologies because it can measure different many water surface characteristics at regional scale with relatively higher temporal and spatial resolutions compared to field measurements, and also it provide perfect data set for the numerical model as initial condition and boundary conditions. So this is my research interest. I have been working on remote sensing algorithm to map the water quality constituents, water quality parameters in the water, as well as their application to study phytoplankton community structure, harmful algal blooms, and aquatic plants, as well as organic carbon concentrations and the fluxes in inland, estuary, and coastal waters. Another part of my study is how to integrate remote sensing data into numerical model to study the future scenarios, especially the phytoplankton community in responding to climate change and the restorations. So a little bit background, why remote sensing can map these water quality parameters? Because as you have seen here, this is a satellite imagery for coastal Louisiana. You can see it's very colorful. You have seen black water and the bright brownish color water, as well as green and blue color. And in those estuaries, you see the black color, that because of carbon-rich water. And as you have seen here, the carbon stay down color dissolved organic matter is strongly absorbed the blue light. That means less reflectance from the water. That's why it's in that color. And the sediment is another story because it strongly scatters the light. The pink line here, the back scattering, but it's just slightly absorb the water, absorb the light in the water. And also for the phytoplankton, they can be different color. It depends on how they scatter and absorb the light. So the absorption and backscattering of these water constituents together, they cause inherent optical properties and further determine how much light leaving the water surface and detected by the satellite. So one of the fundamental parameter we use for remote sensing algorithm is called remote sensing reflectance. It is a function of absorption and backscattering in the water. And as you know, backscattering and absorption can be linked to the concentration metrics in the water. That's how water quality can be mapped from remote sensing data. And usually very common carbon sediment and phytoplankton can be mapped from the remote sensing data using some empirical or more complicated equations. But for some second layer parameters like nutrient or carbon dioxide, flux, and air sea surface. And they are the functions of many water quality parameters as well as physical parameters like salinity, temperature. So this is really the time we can use machine learning as well as big data to study these parameters from at regional scale using remote sensing data. As you have seen here, these are spectrum that I extracted from the remote sensing data for the Louisiana coast. They are in very different spectral shift. That means we have diverse water types for coastal Louisiana. As you have seen here, the open ocean, we have stronger blue reflectance, and the x-axis is the wavelength from 400 to 700 nanometer, which means the visible light. And this is the open ocean, and this is Coccolese River blue, which is in the hypoxia zone, right? And also very turbid water, a Atlantic basin. And the Galveston Bay is the very turbid water, but it's algae-laden waters. As you have seen here, there's a small peak, which is the phytoplankton fluorescence. And all of these optical properties that we can use as a proxy to map some parameters from the water. And you may ask me, there are already some standard products from NASA, from ESA, from NOAA. Why you are still working on this? Because this global, like chlorophyll A products, it works well in open ocean, but it doesn't work in coastal waters, in estuarine waters, especially in Louisiana. Here we have optically complex waters. So from remote sensing, we can look at the phytoplankton biomass. Chlorophyll A is a very common parameter that we use to study phytoplankton biomass, as well as functional types and the size fraction. But can we study species? And the answer is yes, we can with the future satellite missions, especially the hyperspectral satellite mission from NASA. Later I will talk about it. So as you can see here, when phytoplankton in bloom condition, it can be in different color, and the brown tides, red tides, green algae bloom, and so we also need some information from the space to tell people whether this algal bloom is toxic or non-toxic. That requires us to extract the species information from satellite data. And I put here the NOAA cyanobacteria index products here because it's very helpful in freshwater system, help us to identify where is the high risk for cyanobacteria bloom. So this is a study that we conducted for Louisiana, and there is a lot of chlorophyll A products, but it works well for open ocean, and it just failed in coastal Louisiana. And we collected a lot of data in the Northern Gulf of Mexico, and we developed an algorithm only for inland and estuarine waters. And this is our algorithm. Now we also figure out the threshold. When should we use our algorithm? When should we use NASA standard products? So we developed an adaptive approach and to combine different chlorophyll A products, and this is a comparison for the chlorophyll distribution in coastal Louisiana. The above panel is from the standard products, and the below panel is from our products. And from the concentration and distribution patterns, how much difference you can see between these two types of products. And we collect the water samples from different estuaries in coastal Louisiana. This is a validation. The satellite estimated chlorophyll A against the in situ chlorophyll A for standard products and for our products. And based on the chlorophyll A, and we further employed EOF analysis. I'm gonna skip the technical details, but if you're interested, just feel free to come to me and we can have a discussion on that. And we can extract the size fractions from chlorophyll A products. And this is from large to small phytoplankton, from macro to nano and micro. Obviously, macro phytoplankton is more abundant estuaries in inland waters. And one interesting thing is for meso phytoplankton, the small phytoplankton, its highest fraction always coincides with the location of warm core algae and the loop current. And that's also an indication for future scenarios. Because meso phytoplankton, they like warm temperature. And talk about, think about the climate change, we have warming temperature. That means it also have effects on the phytoplankton community structure. That means the potential for harms because cyanobacteria is one type of phytoplankton. And this project is the backbone of our recently funded NASA and NOAA project. Later, I will introduce a little more on those two projects. And this is some other information about phytoplankton we conducted in Gulf someday. And in addition to sex fractions, we also can extract the pigment concentration from phytoplankton. Also phytoplankton, they have chlorophyll A to support them to do the photosynthesis. But there are some other accessory pigments and which can be considered as biomarker pigments and to help to identify which phytoplankton groups is there. And it's very helpful because it can tell us whether whether this group because there are some species under some group are toxic, and it just provide us some additional information to look at these harmful blooms. And this is the study we conducted after Hurricane Harvey, and we went out immediately to collect the samples. And we created the maps for different pigments in phytoplankton, and so this pigment map was validated by HPLC as well as flow battle and it works well. And I just want to mention that we collect a lot of absorption. I just missed a lot of information in this version. And we collect a lot of absorption data to help us decompose the absorption spectrum into different phytoplankton groups. And the first row is cryptophyte, and it has a pink pigments in their body can cause the pink oyster events. So after Hurricane Harvey, a few times the pink oyster events was reported, and our products are just very helpful for the resources manager in Galveston region to tell them where you need to go to do your sample collection, because we can detect where is this type of harmful bloom happening. And so this kind of combination between management and research, we really want to produce some products that can help management and then get through the best practices for resources management. And this algorithm also applied to study the red tide in the Florida coast. And this is the first time it was reported the synchronous blooms happened in Gulf Coast by two species, is red tide and the coccolizophyr. So using our pigment map, we delineate these two species, and first the red tide happened, and then the coccolizophyr bloom. So with all of the information, and we think we should create a product that can deliver simple information to tell people where is the risk for HAPs. And also our idea is motivated by this oyster mortality events. And we want to tell people, okay, this is the spot for high risk of HAPs. So we develop with currently it has a lot of chlorophyll A products, and we just showed slightly different for spatial distribution as well as the concentration. So in our machine learning model, we include the phytoplankton pigments as well as turbidity. We're also considering temperature and salinity into these products to tell people where's the risk to the oyster. And this is a product from our machine learning model. And as you have seen here, when that oyster mortality event happening here in this region, it showed a high risk of HAPs. And these are the 4 standard products, and we included in the machine learning model. And as you have seen here, this is from ESA standard chlorophyll A, European Space Agency. This is NOAA's chlorophyll A products. And this is our product, and we tell the model if 2 or more than 2 products tell you the chlorophyll A is higher than a threshold, and we will define this area as high risk. And then similar for low, medium, and high. And so with that, we also include the segment concentration into the model. So people with this product, with this model, it can easily help us to go back to the historical data and the future data. And people don't have to worry about how to generate the chlorophyll A products and what is the uncertainties between different chlorophyll A products. So once you have satellite data, you just throw it in the model and it will tell you whether it's high, medium, low, or no risk for this area, for the hubs, for oysters. And this is our current hub project, and we're trying to wrap up this project with the final project and to include all of this information into the final project. Hopefully, this type of product is gonna helpful for the water resources management. And here we analyzed 5 years data from 2017 to 2023. And we create an annual average for HAB stress index. As you have seen here, this is a comparison between a flooded year and extremely dry year between 2019 and 2023. And the HAB stress index distributions is kind of different in responding to environmental stressors. And this is a very recent case. The harmful algal bloom happened in Lake Pontchartrain, and we have extensive cyanobacteria bloom happened in Lake Pontchartrain this June. And our products accurately capture the patterns of the development of cyanobacteria bloom. And here you will see and how it developed and how it disappeared from the remote sensing data. And all of the products I talked before this slide is based on multispectral satellite. It means it only have a few bands and with very a few broad and discrete bands. But the future satellite mission, it is a hyperspectral satellite, and NASA is pushing very hard to this direction. And this is a comparison between hyperspectral and the multispectral. And as you can see here, hyperspectral is just provide so much more information for the water quality for different water types compared to the multispectral from different satellite sensors. And this is currently the hyperspectral satellite data is very limited, and this is some data I downloaded for Louisiana. I extract the spectra in different regions across the wetlands and the estuaries. As you have seen here, it has so much more information that help us. It's very helpful for the land use and cover classification with hyperspectral satellite. And this is a comparison between the multispectral and the future hyperspectral missions from ESA, from NASA, and from different space agencies. And basically, you have, for hyperspectral data, you have much higher spectral resolution. And in the meantime, you face challenges how to see your data because it's much bigger compared to the multispectral data. And so, going with the hyperspectral satellite missions, I'm trying to establish my hyperspectral optics lab at UL. And we have the instrument to absorb to measure the absorption coefficients for different phytoplankton. We have the hyperspectral macroscope and the macro imaging system to measure the reflectance down to the nanoscale. So that those type of information going to be very helpful for future satellite missions. This is just a comparison. It's a diagram to help you easily understand what's the difference between multispectral and hyperspectral. And with this much more information, now it is possible for us to study species, whether it's toxic or non-toxic when a bloom happening. And this is our ongoing work, which is got funded by NOAA for the hypoxia program. And we're going to use the coupled hydrodynamic and biogeochemical model to study the HABs and the hypoxia for the future scenario if responding to warming temperature and the precipitation, as well as we're going to conduct the field measurements. And all of these points, it has hypoxia relevant measurements as well as hyperspectral measurements to help us develop the algorithm applied to future hyperspectral satellites. And we're collaborating with LSU and the USCS on this project. And we're also co-funded by the Army Corps to do the hyperspectral stuff, as well as integrating remote sensing data with water quality modeling to study Lake Pontchartrain. And we're going to collect the tons of vector data for the harmful algal bloom species for their absorption and the reflectance spectrum, apply it to this hyperspectral satellite data because it was launched by DRL, which is a German space agency. And as you have seen here, we have some preliminary results, and the algorithm works to tell us what species in the water in this image. And so going with NASA, this is hyperspectral satellite mission going to be launched in January 2024. It's called PACE. It's the Phytoplankton Aerosol Ocean System. And I was selected as the early adopter and the science team. So there was like 1 to 2 scientists from each state to represent the work for each state. So I'm very honored to be there and to work on the satellite algorithm using their hyperspectral satellite sensor. And this is some preliminary results that before I joined the UL, I was working at the Water Institute, and we actually worked closely with CPRA on the model simulations, and we have done tons of work to evaluate the sediment diversion to the ecosystem. And this is the part of the work that we haven't dig into the details to study the phytoplankton functional types in responding to the sediment diversion. And we're going to use hyperspectral satellite data to inform the model and to provide a boundary and initial conditions to drive the model for future scenarios in responding to climate change or restorations in the model. And this is yes, I think this is all that I want to present for phytoplankton. But I also have been doing some work related to carbon using remote sensing data. So this is the work this is the algorithm we developed using Landsat and MODIS data to study dissolved organic carbon in Barataria Basin. As you have seen here, the dissolved organic carbon in Barataria Basin showed very different distribution patterns under different environmental scenarios. The normal conditions, then the vent region is very calm, the river discharge is very low, and also cold front condition, as well as flooding condition. And this is our recently published work on the dissolved organic carbon using 3 different satellite sensors from high spatial resolution to low resolution from 10 meter to 300 meter. And we combine these 3 satellite sensors because we want to see the longer time series. And as you have seen here, we studied 2019, and by using high spatial resolution data, we can estimate the dissolved organic carbon from small attributes, from small streams, and along with the water volume measurements from USDS and Omicron, we estimate there's a total 6.7 telegram carbon from these rivers into coastal Louisiana. And this tons of carbon, and for 2019, and extremely flooding here, and it's just doubles the existing records for the carbon fluxes and also for the river discharge, right? And the tons of carbon released into the water, it just can have some opposite effects on the climate change because decomposition gonna happen there and more CO2 gonna release it into the atmosphere. So satellite data, I just want to mention satellite data can be also applied to study carbon sediment in the water. And this is a case study we conducted for Hurricane Ida. Before and after Hurricane Ida, you have seen here this much land loss happened in Barataria Basin, and we also use those products to look at what is the change between and what is the change of dissolved organic carbon between before and after Hurricane Ida. And as you have seen here, the land loss area is the dissolved organic carbon concentration is extremely high. But we don't have enough field data to support us to go further to figure out what is the fractions of carbon released from wetlands. Because when we have wetland loss and part of carbon loss into the water, into the atmosphere, and this is one of the topics that I'm super interested to move forward on it. And yes, long story short, and this is all of the hyperspectral satellite sensor that NASA is planning. And I do want to mention this one that NASA is collaborating with NOAA. It's called Glimmer. It's going to be launched in next, I think within 3 years. And this is a geostationary satellite. It just look at the government scale. It can provide you 6 to 7 images per day in hyperspectral image. It's really powerful to monitor the disaster or like harmful algal bloom events and how the blooms develop and disappear, and also help the people to estimate the fluxes right from the wetlands into the estuaries. I think that's all, and I hope with the future satellites, hyperspectral satellites missions, I can do more, contribute more to the water quality monitoring in coastal Louisiana. And I'm also looking forward to the future collaborations with BTNEP. And thank you again for the funding support and opportunity for me to share my water quality research here. Thank you. I'm ready to take questions.
Do you have any questions?
So, Dr. Liu, this work with at least with the harmful algal blooms, is your intent to have this available for like the mollusk and shellfish program through Department of Health, where they could use this tool to predict any potential harmful algal bloom outbreaks, say for oyster harvesting to help protect the health of oysters and human health?
Yes, that's a great question. Actually, right now we are working with NASA to establish this relationship. They really want to look, they really forward the co-production process. Means the researchers, stakeholders, state managers work together and generate some very useful products for their management. And we work with LDWF for the NASA piece, and we're trying to learn what is their needs, because it's very important. Research is driven by needs, and we want to create some products that help. It's very helpful for their. We work with their oyster manager there, and on our advisory team also has LDQ and Angelina from CPRA, and then we're trying to gather this information to create the most useful information from this NASA case sensor.
And before you leave, if there's no other questions, I just want to emphasize the work that you're doing with organic carbon. I think it's like seeing wetland loss in real time. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal. But thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. All right, we have breaking news. It's not even on the agenda. So this is, I asked Andrew to come up and talk with, Dustin Ravelay about, I think, some saltwater issues that we now.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So, about 20 years ago, back in 2000, the year 2000, when I was a young whippersnapper, I was still working for DEQ, and I was positioned over here in the BTNEP office. And there were these transects that were being flown by Department of Wildlife and Fisheries for nutria. They were monitoring nutria out in the marshes. And they noticed that in the spring of, I guess it was the spring of 2000, they noticed that the salt marshes were not recovering like they normally would during the spring. And so they referred to this phenomenon as brown marsh or marsh dieback. And there was a huge task force, and we at BTNEP actually led the effort. There was $3 million that came through NOAA to the Department of Natural Resources, and BTNEP distributed it through our Scientific Technical Committee. And it was ultimately found that it was associated with low river stage. And right now, we're seeing a prolonged low river stage. And so why is this coming up now? Because yesterday, my colleagues, Siva Nuna and Emily Bro were out doing our normal monthly water quality sampling for our DEQ. We're working under our DEQ contract in Bayou Falls. And that is the area roughly, Thibodeau's up here, and it goes down here to Lake Fields, okay? It basically is bounded at the south end where Company Canal is. And so they were sampling essentially right around here, if I'm seeing that right. And so they measured 4 parts per million at the sampling site. Now we've been sampling there since 2016, every month, and most of that time twice a month. And the highest levels we've sampled there have been like last month, there was 0.21 parts per thousand. And so yesterday we measured 4 parts per thousand. And that is huge. So I called up Dustin, and I also spoke to the regional DEQ field manager out of Lockport, and he was telling me that, let's see if I can see it on the map properly. So this is the Berg-LaRose Highway, and there is a boat launch right over here, which is just on the, I think it's on the north end of the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway. And he said that, so that's, that launches into Big Bayou Blue, the boat launch. I don't know if some of y'all might be familiar with it, but he said that they measured just recently, they measured 13 parts per thousand. And then down here near Golden Meadow at Basonos boat launch, which is right around here near the sulfur mine. You launch there to go to the sulfur mine. They measured 20 parts per thousand. So for Louisiana, just to give you an idea, off the coast of Louisiana, that's similar to full strength seawater for us, 20 parts per thousand. So what we're seeing is a coastwide saltwater intrusion. And that's because of a combination of low river stage and low rainfall, okay? And why am I bringing this up? Because this is a big threat to ecological resources that we're seeing in real time right now. Everyone in the news has been hearing about Lower Plaquemines Parish and the threat to their drinking water resources. Well, right now, what we're seeing here is we're going to be seeing, you know, this is Andrew making a prediction. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but based on previous experience, we're going to be seeing some severe impacts, not just to freshwater marshes. Keep in mind, on this sampling site on Big Bayou Blue, most of that is floating freshwater marsh. Okay, so having 13 parts per thousand measured there, That is way above what you would expect for freshwater marsh. Freshwater marsh, usually the range is between 0 to 2 parts per thousand. So that's way above that. So what I'm predicting, what I'm saying is we're probably gonna see some major impacts to our freshwater marshes from the high salinities. But we're gonna even see, even those Spartina, the saltwater marshes, they can withstand full strength seawater like 35 parts per thousand. But like back in 2000, what we saw a huge die-off in these salt marshes because of the low river stage. That triggers these chemical responses in the soil of the salt marshes. It's part of the sulfur cycle. It oxidizes the sulfur minerals in the soils, and it causes production of sulfuric acid. And so, and it kills the plants. So that's what I suspect we're going to be seeing. And I just wanted to bring that up to the management conference because this is a breaking news, as Quentin mentioned, and it's something that we should all be aware of. And with that, I have a pretty good reputation for being a Debbie Downer when it comes to this kind of stuff. But right now I wanted to bring Dustin up. It was interesting talking to Dustin, and I wanted to have him talk about what the Freshwater District is doing to protect our water resources down here. I think everyone knows on the management conference that all of southeastern Louisiana, so that includes New Orleans and all of us, we all get our drinking water from the Mississippi River. And of course, if you have low discharge, low river stage in the Mississippi River, then that's going to impact all of us. It's impacting human health, and of course, impacting the ecology of the whole region. So Dustin, if you don't mind coming on up and talking to us about what we were talking about yesterday. Cody's gonna put up a slide that Dustin's gonna touch on pretty briefly.
All right, so thank you, Andrew. So as I said, my name is Dustin Rapley. I'm the executive director for the Bayou Freshwater District. And so I got a little bit of good news and bad news. The bad news is, as Andrew said, I didn't really find out I was talking here today until the last minute. So my slide is very primitive in nature. The good news for all of you is that is the only slide I have today. Okay. So yesterday I was sitting at my office and I don't know if y'all do this, but when your cell phone rings and it's a number that you don't know, if I'm busy and I was at that point in time, I don't answer it. I just assume, well, if they leave a message, it's important enough for me to listen to. So I didn't answer it. And while I was doing what I was doing, because I had a meeting shortly thereafter, I listened to the message while I was filling out some paperwork, and it was Andrew leaving a message stating that he detected through their monthly sampling some high toxicity levels in and around Bayou Lafourche. Now, I'm going to give you all a little secret. If you want to get a hold of me very quickly, tell me that you detected something toxic in or near Bayou Lafourche, and I will call you instantly, okay? So that's how this all came about. I will tell you now, Andrew said that they had yesterday detected around 4 parts per thousand. Working with the South Lafourche Freshwater District number 1, I know Andrew's not going to want to hear this, but it's gotten up in Company Canal up to around 10 or 11 in the last 45 days. So with the freshwater district, we take those things into account. We have salinities that we're battling. We have a lot of tools in our toolbox to combat that, which I'll get to. But there's also another issue that we combat, and that's the water surface elevation in the Mississippi River. We don't necessarily deal with them both at the same time. They're not necessarily related, but over time, they do become related. So a lot, well, I'm sure y'all all probably know this, but a lot of people don't realize the water that is placed in the Bayou Lafourche is mechanically placed there. There is no natural connection between the Mississippi River and Bayou Lafourche. We pump that water. Depending on the water surface elevation in the Mississippi River, that can require us to pump it, I don't know, 40 feet at times to maybe 46 feet. That is not necessarily easily achieved. A great example is my first 45 days here, the river was low and we lost power to the pump station. And we lost prime in some of our pumps. Well, when you stop and think about a 48-inch column of water that's maybe, let's say, 45 feet tall, that's a tremendous amount of weight. And we couldn't get our pumps primed. So the low water surface elevations in the Mississippi River causes problems in Donaldsonville. Obviously, the longer those low water surface elevations persist, I'm not saying that there's a ratio between what's going on in Donaldsonville and maybe Plaquemines or South Lafourche Parish, but they could be related, right? The longer that persists, obviously you'll have salinities start to migrate north. So we battle those two things. The slide I have up in front of you is, I think, very telling, very interesting to me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You can have your own opinions on global climate change, that's you. All I do is I look at the data and figure out what do we need to do as a district to ensure that the parishes of West Ascension, Terrebonne, and Lafourche have a fresh source of raw water to treat. Okay, that is our #1 legislative charge. So that is my guiding light at all times. But I found this interesting. If you look on the left, this chart is from USGS. They only allow me to really pull about 5 years, but it shows the crests and the lowest water surface elevations of the Mississippi River. Okay. I'll just get this one out of the way. I found it very interesting. I think the first thing you notice is that the crests over the last 5 years have progressively gotten lower and lower. But that's fine. We can handle the water just perfectly when it crests. But what's important is if you look all the way on the left, now that's not September 19th, that's September 2019, okay? The lowest recorded water surface elevation in Donaldsonville got to an 8.11. Fast forward a year, in October of 2020, the lowest water surface elevation was a 6. In December, or 6.00. In December of 2021, the lowest reported water surface elevation was a 4.69. November 2022, which is, I had to write it, it's a little bit below, it got to 3.15. This year, so far, okay, the lowest water surface elevation we've reported in Donaldsonville has been a 2.8, okay? Now, you'll notice that the progression that the river has tapered off has kind of somewhat subsided. It's not as large of an interval, but what I would tell you is most interesting about this particular year is the duration of how long this is going to occur. So we first encountered these low water surface elevations that present problems to us when we would lose prime in a pump due to a power failure, of which we suffered 2 this year. Typically, we wouldn't see this until about this time of the year. Okay, but as you can see, it started for us back in about July, and it's continuing. So I don't really see or expect any relief from this for at least another 3 months. Because you're going to get these northerly winds, you're not getting any rain that I'm seeing in the Ohio, Mississippi River Valley that would eventually migrate here, raise the river. Now, what do we do in response to this, or what have we done? Okay. Right now, thanks to CPRA, we are under construction of a brand new, now it is currently $96 million pump station that has capabilities to be expanded and will be expanded. It'll initially be built to around 1,000 CFS, cubic feet a second. Currently, right now, we only have the capability to put anywhere between 400 to 450 cubic feet per second. So that's in the works. I'm thinking maybe Q1 of 2025 is when that new station will come online. Our district has procured a high pressure vacuum so that when we do encounter these low Mississippi River elevations, we can hook this high pressure vacuum up to our pumps and help artificially draw that water up, whereas it might be at around a 3, bring it up to an 8 to kind of give our engines a little bit of the boost they need to get that water primed and over the Mississippi River levee. We're looking to install real-time salinity and water surface elevation monitors in and around Lockport and some other areas that would be advantageous to us, so that I don't get a phone call the day of a water district needing our saltwater control structure to be closed. Speaking of, that is another tool in our toolbox in Lockport, just north of the Company Canal. We have a barge we can swing in place. We fill it up with water, it sinks, and then we have some sluice gates, and then we can manipulate the amount of water that's flowing out of Bayou Lafourche. We have one there, and we also have one in Napoleonville. So those are just some of the things that we've done and are doing to try to combat this. As Andrew said, they detected 4 PPTs yesterday in and around the Bayou Falls watershed. Just so you have a matter of reference to how that might most directly impact you. The water we put into Bayou Lafourche all water has some level of salinity, right? But the water that we put in there has a salinity that typically ranges from about 0.25 to 0.4. Okay, that's fine. It's very consistent. That's good to go. Okay. At around 3 PPTs, you could actually start to taste the salinity in your water if you were to drink the tap water. Okay. And I want to say I might be off a little bit on this, but around 3.5, the districts actually become out of compliance with DHH. You can still use it for other things, okay, but it's not recommended to drink anything above a 3. Beneficial if you're cooking spaghetti, you don't need to salt the water, but short of that, not really so great for anything else. So that just gives you an idea how serious this is. What the higher salinity levels will do to the marshes or Bayou Falls watershed or Bayou Lafourche or anything in and around there, I'm not an expert on. I'll leave that to BTNEP and others to talk about. But with that, that's pretty much what I have. If y'all have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Any questions? I must be hungry. Good deal. Thank you.
Okay, I want to remind everybody our next management conference is Thursday, February 8th. It may be in this room or not, but it'll be around here somewhere.
So I wanted to ask Rob Don another question about his presentation.
Sure.
I wanted to tell us why should we care about birds?
The question was, why should we
Why
care?
should we even care about birds with the wind farm?
I mean, I'll take a step back and maybe say, why should we care about birds more generally? So, and I guess I answer it in a 2-pronged fashion. So biologically, you know, I tried to convey how important Louisiana is, particularly the Deltaic Plain, for colonial water birds within the Gulf of Mexico, as far as the portions of the populations that we host in Louisiana. And I'd say the Barataria-Terrebonne region is, you know, at the heart of that. For example, like four of the top 6 or 7 brown pelican colonies, as far as, the colony sizes and presumably the productivity of those colonies. 4 of the 6 or 7 are in the Barataria-Terrebonne, basin. So, host a lot have, responsibility for a very large proportion of colonial water birds, even in the BTNEP area. That's important for the bigger regional populations. And then culturally, super important, there's a lot of societal value that we place on birds. People spend a lot of time bird watching, resources bird watching. A lot of people come to Grand Isle, every year, throughout the year, particularly during migration to see these birds. And yeah.
But they aren't they like, pollinators, seed dispersal?
Yeah, I mean, birds are incredibly important for all of that, particularly seed dispersal. Yeah, the ecological services, that's a much bigger question or bigger conversation, I think, but yeah, very important for ecological services in general. Is that
That's kind of, I mean, I guess
Cover it.
we never talked about that, but I think that's a really important point of even looking at
yeah,
going into
right.
protecting them. Thanks.
Okay, I hope everybody can join us for lunch. We have lunch set up over there, but before we do that, we need to officially adjourn the meeting. So do we have a motion? Dr. Roberts, we have a second. A second?
Come on.
All right. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Bye.